Edward Newgate, more commonly known as Whitebeard, was the captain of the Whitebeard pirates and widely known as the strongest man in the world and the man closest to One Piece after Gold Roger's death. Before forming his own crew, he was a member of the legendary Rocks Pirates, and later in life he became a member of the 4 emperors that rule over the New World, before his death in the Battle of Marineford. After his home country, Sphinx, became too poor to be a member nation of the world government, Newgate became an orphan. He became a pirate at an early age and supported his village with the money and resources he gained. Before forming the Whitebeard Pirates, he was just another crew member in another crew going by his real name Newgate, and that he was not interested in treasure, but instead wanted a family. Sometime after this, at least 40 years ago, he joined the Rocks Pirates, but eventually left after the God Valley incident, 38 years ago, and at least 33 years ago, he would go on to form his own pirate crew, the Whitebeard Pirates. Oden and Whitebeard clash. 30 years ago, Whitebeard and his crew were shipwrecked at Wano country. They encountered Kozuki Oden and he asked to join his crew after a brief clash with Whitebeard. Afterwards, Whitebeard and his crew had a feast with Oden and his retainers. Oden kept asking to join only to be turned down. 2 weeks later, the Whitebeard pirates tried to leave Oden behind, but he caught up to them and held onto a chain he attached to the ship. Izzo also held onto Oden and got dragged away with him. After pulling Izzo up onto the ship, Whitebeard gave Oden a test. If he could hold onto the chain for 3 days, he would be allowed into the crew. Just when Oden only had 10 minutes left, he heard a woman in trouble and let go, drifting to an island. On the next day, Whitebeard found Oden and a woman named Toki confronted by Karma and his crew. Whitebeard defeated Karma and finally allowed Oden to join his crew. Inuarashi and Nekomamushi, who had stowed away on Whitebeard's ship, joined the crew as well. 2 years after Oden joined, Whitebeard decided to divide his crew into divisions and appointed Oden as commander of the 2nd division. Sometime later, he met Marshal D. Teach and granted his request to join the Whitebeard Pirates. Around 2 years later, the Whitebeard Pirates arrived at an island and noticed a commotion that frightened even the animals. After Oden confronted the Roger Pirates and got blown away by Roger, Whitebeard and Roger clashed. The 2 crews battled for 3 days. After the battle, the crews formed a truce and exchanged gifts. Roger told Oden and Whitebeard about his intention to reach the final island in the Grand Line and asked to borrow Oden for a year. Though Whitebeard did not fully agree, Oden decided to join Roger. Whitebeard expressed his annoyance after Oden parted ways with his crew. He later found out that Inuarashi and Nekomamushi followed Oden as well. In his prime, Whitebeard was a rival to Gold Roger, and following Roger's death, was widely recognized as the strongest man in the world, a fact complemented by having the highest active bounty whilst alive, and the 2nd highest bounty of any pirate in history. Edward Newgate was a cheerful and carefree person during his younger years, prior to commanding his own ship and becoming known as Whitebeard. Due to being an orphan who grew up in poverty, Newgate had a strong desire for a family, which he saw as the greatest treasure one could have. He was not ashamed of this wish, which was considered strange and humorous among his pirate peers. His reign on the sea, reputation, and foreboding power made him seemingly overconfident and fearless. In initial appearances, he seemed unable to see any cause for alarm on any decision he made and refused all advice given to him, such as his nurse telling him not to drink heavily or Shanks warning him of Blackbeard. However, he was much more thoughtful than he initially appeared to be. Actions that initially seemed to be the result of thoughtless, headstrong bravado actually had strong reasons behind them. His loud declaration that Fishman Island belonged to him freed the island from all pirates and slavery, and his insistence that Blackbeard be punished was merely a cover for Ace, who had set out after him against Whitebeard's wishes. Whitebeard was one of the most powerful and influential pirates of his generation. He garnered the title strongest man in the world before even the late pirate king Gold Roger's death and was one of the world's few to ever match Roger in one-on-one combat. I am only one man with one heart, call me a demon, call me a monster, but I can't be the strongest forever. Whitebeard's response to his status as the strongest man in the world. After Roger's death, Whitebeard became one of the 4 emperors, the 4 most formidable pirates ruling the latter half of the Grand Line and the biggest pirate threats to the world government. Prior to his own passing, Whitebeard held not only the highest bounty among those 4, but the second highest in recorded history, at over 5 billion, only behind Roger's own. Whitebeard was given the title of the strongest man in the world for his physical power, which is far superior to even a giant. During the Marineford War, Whitebeard completely overpowered vast numbers of strong marine officers and giants with tremendous physical might, such as Vice Admiral Rance, with only one hand and supplemented by his devil fruit powers. Whitebeard blocked a 2-handed downward swing from the giant Vice Admiral John Giant with only one hand on his naginata, extinguished the flames of one of Akainu's molten rocks with just a single breath, and prevented a massive paddle ship from advancing using only one hand. He could jump to great heights to attack large opponents, such as John Giant. Besides his formidable power, Whitebeard was a brilliant leader and an incredibly skilled military strategist, a match for former Fleet Admiral Sengoku, one renowned as the resourceful general for his famed acumen on the field of battle. The Emperor's tactical prowess was demonstrated when he saw through Sengoku's deliberate leak of information regarding a change of schedule for Ace's execution, and when he foresaw the pacifists' arrival at Marineford and scattered the pirates so that they would not be routed by the cyborgs. Whitebeard ate the Gura Gura no Mi, a paramecia-type devil fruit that allowed him to cause quakes and generate powerful shockwaves. This power is considered to be the strongest devil fruit power within the paramecia class. According to Sengoku, Whitebeard had the power to destroy the world. With the power of this devil fruit, Whitebeard could create powerful shockwaves by shattering the air like glass. These shockwaves then would be redirected into the ground, resulting in earthquakes and, if under the seafloor, tsunamis. He could create these shockwaves in the air, rendering airborne attacks ineffective. He could also use these shockwaves to attack enemies, with either widespread or specific targets. Whitebeard's powers also allowed him to create a quake bubble around his hand or naginata to increase the power of his physical attacks, as well as manipulate the air with his hands to tilt the environment around him. He also used his naginata to slash the air, which caused a massive explosion and the collapse of a tower in Marineford. Whitebeard could also use these shockwaves to block physical attacks as well as non-physical attacks, making his devil fruit powers excellent for both offensive and defensive capabilities. Soon after Whitebeard's death, the power of the fruit was extracted by Blackbeard through unknown means. Whitebeard wielded a gigantic naginata called Murakomagari, one of the 12 supreme swords. He was immensely skilled with the blade even in old age. He could use Murakomagari to fight off countless powerful marines in Marineford, including marine admirals, and during his prime, he also clashed with Kozuki Oden, who was one of the strongest samurais of Wano. When he was a child, he had a much smaller and less well-crafted spear made up of a simple knife bound to a pole. After Whitebeard's death, it became a marking for his burial site, with his coat, a bouquet of flowers, and the crew's flag hanging from it. Whitebeard is one of the very small number of people in the world who can use all 3 types of Haki. Whitebeard possessed House Hoku Haki. During his initial encounter with Kozuki Oden 30 years ago, their sudden clash created a notable effect similar to lightning and released a large burst. His House Hoku Haki was displayed to a far greater extent against his longtime rival, Gold Roger. Their clashing House Hoku Haki cracked the air, creating an effect akin to lightning and generating a shockwave larger than the island, repelling the giant trees around them alongside the crewmates of the Roger and Whitebeard pirates and nearly capsizing the Moby Dick. During the Marineford War, he was on the verge of using it against some of the world government's executioners to protect poor Gas d'Ace but failed because of a sudden illness attack.